Then I would like to talk about the Mahamudra within the Tibetan context. Of course, as you know, Mahamudra has been developed, first developed in India, then they came to Tibet, then now to the West. So I would like to really look into what this traditional Mahamudra, Mahamudra in the traditional framework of Tibetan culture, for example, which was developed, right, came to the West, offered to us in the modern world, as well as what does the modern world that we are living in this modern culture and contemporary world can bring insight into the Mahamudra tradition itself without the constraint of Tibetan culture, so to speak, while honoring the tradition itself. Then we really go into the Mahamudra view, Mahamudra stages. There are 3 stages of Mahamudra unfolding, you can say. There are many ways to talk about, of course, many ways to go about, approach Mahamudra as a tradition or Mahamudra as a meditative tool and Mahamudra as a realization view. View is this outlook, how we view the reality or how we view the self. So that comes first. We're going to talk more about that, why we need to glimpse into the view. That's important first. First of all, before even we started engaging Mahamudra practice. Now, practice entail the 3 stages, preliminary practice or foundational practice, and then shamatha, cultivation of mental stabilization. So that's shamatha, so-called karma abiding. Then the third one is the insight into reality called the vipassana, special insight. Those things in the future we come in the sequence. Then we practice together. Then the third one is the, how that manifests, that how that view manifests in the world, how we can live based on that view and practice. So that is called conduct. So the view, practice, or meditation and conduct, because that's the classical ways to present. And then, of course, now we get into this ground Mahamudra. It's called ground Mahamudra, path Mahamudra, and fruition Mahamudra. So ground Mahamudra comes first. So that's the kind of related view I was talking about. Ground of everything. So that's one I would like to focus on today. What is it? What is the source of spirit? Before freedom, nirvana, and samsara. So this ground on the foundation. Then I would like to practice ground Mahamudra transmissions. See if we can get into a little bit of glimpse into this, what ground Mahamudra feels like, or see it with direct inner eyes, so to speak, direct experience. We hear a lot about ground or this terminology a teacher or literature describe, but the direct experience, that's the only count. And also I don't want you to slap the concept onto your own experience. So if you don't have it, then I don't want to bring concept, then undermine your direct experience or whatever you are having. All right, let's start with a little bit what Mahamudra reviewed, the definitions and Great Seal, the union of emptiness and clarity, that is our true nature. Just one quote from the textbook, Sore Natsurando. Mahamudra is the supreme approach. So he is talking about Mahamudra as an approach or style, attitude. Supreme approach. It reveals the natural state of mind, the spontaneous presence of the 3 kayas. So this is Buddha's kaya, Buddha's body, in a straightforward, just straight, go directly, not detouring, trying to indirectly. It's called a straightforward, accessible manner. So Mahamudra is accessible because always here, right here. difference between us, or maybe most of us, and those masters who actualize or realize whether he knowing this or not. This is a solo path, only path that is traveled by all the supreme Siddhas and Vidyadharas. These great masters of the past, awakened master, tread this exactly same path we are about to embark. So that's what this quote is talking about. Then covered by the web of disturbing emotions, like a clouds or whatever, hindrance or whatever, one is then sentient beings. Freed from disturbing emotions or clouds of hindrances, one is called Buddha. So this is another quote. Okay, Nyingma said, so what's the nature of this Mahamudra talking about? Your mind is Dharmakaya, mind of Buddha. All of us, this, our mind, nature, true nature, is Buddha mind, awake mind. You could never be reunited with. You try to reunite, or you try to be with, nor could you be separated from it. It is so close that you do not recognize it. Because that's already, we have this, it's so close, so we couldn't recognize it. Like when you are wearing glasses, then try to look for the glasses. It appears to you, yet it is so profound. So it seems like a very obvious and simple, it appears, but so profound, deep, subtle. You do not grasp it. You could not get it because it looks so simple, but profound. It is so simple that you do not believe it. So it is so simple or the so dark kind of, I don't know. So couldn't believe it. So that's the Nyingma's experience. So that's the thing we are getting into. So Mahamudra within the traditional Tibetan context. So many of you have heard about Mahamudra and also some of you practicing. Mahamudra is an ancient practice. You can say since the awakened Shakyamuni Buddha and thousands of years tradition. Mahamudra has been 2,600 years, which is Buddha's, right? Since the time of the Buddha. Then until now, you can say now means this modern era, it was not being readily available in Tibet. So Mahamudra was considered with the advanced practice in Tibet, owing to the geographical remoteness of Tibet. So Mahamudra was very kind of special jewel, kind of reward after you finish all these practices. Then you can get to the Mahamudra. So that sort of tradition approach was developed in Tibet. Of course, Mahamudra practice required foundations and a level of practice and the psychological openness and the engagement in this kind of subtle practice. So that in Tibet, Mahamudra was considered, it's not possible really for the modern people who never even engaged any so-called foundational practice or something like that, especially in Tibet or Asia in general. That's why the Mahamudra practice tradition was adapted to the monastic curriculum or system, and also the very limited group of yogis and yoginis in really their life devoted to this kind of practice. See, now different. Now it's becoming more available in the West. Although it has 2.5, what do you call the millennium old, it's so relevant. So that's what the Mahamudra tradition offers to us in the modern culture, modern world. And what does the modern world bring insight? to the Mahamudra. Contribution of, you can say, modern contemporary approach world, and also practicing the Mahamudra or depth of Mahamudra within the framework of modern life without the constraint of Tibetan culture. What that means. So it's important to realize tradition of Mahamudra is a deep and ancient tradition, as I was talking about. At the same time, it doesn't give us answer, so to speak, answer in the world. For example, dilemma we are facing in the modern world. So we practitioners ourselves have to discover what is needed in the modern culture now from what Mahamudra approach offered to us. In other words, Mahamudra is a tool, not answer. Mahamudra is a tool to make us, each of us, make an exploration, tool to discover what is needed now, individually and collectively in the world. So in that sense, each of us, we are the one who have to discover, who have to go on a journey. If we come to this kind of journey class or program, then try to find the answer from somewhere, from the traditions, we get disappointed, we get overwhelmed. Unless we, each of us, tread this journey and discover, it's difficult. And also, those struggles become a part of path. That's the thing. So there's nothing outside of Mahamudra journey in our life. Another thing is this psychological dimensions, important, what the modern insight offers. Tremendous psychological insight can offer to the Mahamudra culturally colored traditions. We have a term called Cho Mahamudra. Yeah, Cho is one form of Mahamudra. In that sense, trauma, for example, or that those part of us, there are many ways to talk about it, but Mahamudra takes a positive attitude toward trauma or shadow or whatever arises, body carries, or whatever might be. They give us not something to get rid of, push away, or ignore, or drowning. Yeah, something to work with. So give us the things we need to work on in order to grow as a human and as a practitioner. Both the same thing. So you can say we are almost like going back to the original as well. When we look at the tradition, Mahamudra traditions, initially developed, it was nothing to do with the institution or organized kind of big monastic curriculum or something. Those practitioners left the monastery, like a wandering yogi. When you look at the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha's life stories, that's a human tradition, you can say. You know, just Shakyamuni Buddha as a human being, exactly like us, came to the bottom of it, discovered truth. So that's actually we need to keep in our mind as well. Otherwise, we get trapped of this Tibetan culture brings this little bit of negative, you can say, impact of religious institution on people's development. Maybe especially we have some kind of feeling about that. And the hierarchical system Tibetan culture brings. And the power struggle, I don't know, the way in which power is often used in a not so wholesome way. That's another thing, this institutionalized version of Mahamudra. We need to be honoring, of course, honoring it, but then also need to be aware of trap in that. So another thing modern world can contribute is this scientific research or scientific worldview. Since modern people are very educated, highly inquisitive, we like to really inquire, then based on science, not based on the belief system or somebody, even teacher says so. we don't have this kind of approach. That's actually very good. Dalai Lama always encourage us to questioning, no? We don't want to settle into, even Buddha said, don't believe what I said. You just discover yourself. Some of you have been practicing Dzogchen and Mahamudra, perhaps, and how, this kind of culture or the core or the essence of Mahamudra can contribute to our human development as well as spiritual maturity development. In other words, contribution of modern world is the way in which the modern situation is helping Buddhism itself, not only Mahamudra, cleansing or purifying the view of its own history and the spiritual development.
I don't understand what makes it Mahamudra. Like what, for example, like Zen sitting meditation, or I don't know, like what, I don't understand what makes it the actual practice, what differentiates it from other practices with different names. Can you explain that to me?
Mahamudra practice, it's called the second one, practice or meditation, is very similar to, you can say, Zen practice, but then different, very different as well. And meditation practice. This is the meditation traditions, as well as way of life and everything. Zen is also like that, no? It has a structure, the shamatha cultivating the attention. Then really look into the reality, insight into how things exist. How is it? So then we combine both. Then we live from that. I hope your question, the difference between Zen and Mahamudra, or maybe even Dzogchen, can unfold as we go and practice ourselves. I just kind of lingering on this prelude little bit, because I think this is something nice to think about. What does this mean? Why I'm practicing Mahamudra? There are many other traditions and other groups, other ways to approach, and why I'm here.
As I'm delving into the practices as you're suggesting them, and what I'm noticing is my experience is different. I'm not quite sure I can delineate the theoretical or philosophical pieces, but so far, but I'm not sure that I ever really focused in as deeply on the calm abiding nature, or the nature of being with everything just as it arises, in the way that the meditation that you've suggested we do does, and the breathing quite so much. And what I'm noticing is, if I came in through the Dzogchen window, and then also through the window of Shaktipat in the Siddha tradition. And both of those felt like very fiery and very transformative, both physically and emotionally, and just very in a very intense way for me. And this feels almost like I'm entering into the river. It feels like I'm entering into more of the element of water. And it feels more like I'm much more in that calm abiding. I now understand that language, because I feel it in the experience. And it's interesting to come to Mahamudra after having spent so long with Dzogchen. It feels, there was a part of me that almost resisted that. I felt like, oh, I don't need that, But now I feel like I'm really experiencing the deep value of it.
Each tradition or each lineage leads to the same ocean, same place. Then just approach, and the flavor is different. Dzogchen approach is different from Mahamudra, I could say. Yeah, Mahamudra course, there are many ways to talk about it, but a little more step by step, so to speak. Although we do the ground Mahamudra first transmission. So we need to have this glimpse a little bit. What's that taste like? Then once we get to the glimpse or taste or flavors, then pass Mahamudra, second phase, step by step, really stabilize and cultivate the capacity to discover that one and maintain it, not just once glimpse. That doesn't serve the world, but the glimpses are important. But then the path Mahamudra will really stabilize, discover, first cultivate that mental stabilization. This is a very important phase, shamatha, calm abiding. Then once calm abiding, maybe we may not just complete. We don't need to have a complete calm abiding, but to a certain level of the mental stability, then we look directly. And there are many ways to look into, but the reality, nature of mind, that's one way to say it. What is it? That part is called Vipassana, second phase. Then we combined both shamatha, calm abiding, and special insight, inquiries. But inquiry, but not the analytical inquiry. It's completely empirical. Look directly at it. I'm gonna put the finger, look this, look that, I will guide you. Then you really look with that sharp tools you develop. Like a sharp, what you call the telescope. In shamatha, you build a very nice telescope. Once you get the nice telescope, then when I say the look at this, you are able to look at that. So once you get that, then you are able to reconnect to that glimpse you had, or you can get more accustomed. Meditation means get used to it, right? So with practice, so that's the main practice. Then the third phase, I'm kind of going this, then that how we can bring that, how we can live with that presence in this world of suffering. Of course, the fruition part is what is the fruition. It's not going to transcend at all. I want you to really experience it. Maybe you already started to feel this. Result of meditation, for example, result of your practice, it's not about become a holy and transcend. Become more, perhaps more open-heartedness, or more loving, more accepting, more allowing, and embracing, and helping, and fearless compassion, can't help but helping. Yeah, that's sort of spontaneous presence coming out of this practice. Yeah, in that sense, very systematic, step by step, we have a path to tread. But at the same time, we want to know where we're going, so to speak. There are two approaches, you can say. Insight coming based on the practice, and the practice based on insight. Those two approaches. In Tibetan tradition, they talk about. So Mahamudra approach is the insight coming from the practice. Although we have a glimpse in the beginning, Grand Mahamudra, but more like a practice. Then from the practice, inside is naturally bubbles up. Elizabeth was saying that like a river, or including everything, every part of our human life. And Dzogchen practice is the insight, resting in that insight, Ripa. Yeah, so view is important in the beginning of our journey. Why? Because if we get the glimpse, we miss it. If we don't know what we are going after, I don't know, I don't like this word going after, but we need to know the ultimate basic space. There are many ways to talk about it. How we look at things, how we experience things. This mind essence devoid of ground and root is the basis of all phenomena. Although I have to say, you are getting a glimpse into there on and off. For example, the end of subtle body training, I kind of pointing out, so to speak. Then you rest it. But then, of course, that's just a glimpse, just a feeling or experience. That is coming and go. Difference between realization and experience is that experience is just temporary. And also experience, I experience. So there is still duality here. The experiencer and experiencing and what experienced, so to speak. Then we want to bring that to the realization. Then there's no duality, subject and object. You are that, nameless, actually. So if we receive the teaching about the view now, little bit introducing, sounds like very artificial, but that's very important. If things happen, then we don't miss it. We don't need to freak out. We can relax into that. Even at this time, deathbed, when death comes, you can relax into that, the luminosity or emptiness, inseparable from bliss. That's why these kind of things are important, especially in the beginning of journey. So in terms of practice of meditations, this making a relationship and a connection with the fundamental ground more and more. How that the first glimpse into that, you can say true face, your own face, who and what you are, your own face, or true nature is honored and pursued. Do I trust that glimpse or a sense of connection? Thing is that we build up more trust, more and more, like a relationship. In the phase of practice of meditation, we get more and more intimate. First we meet somebody and then we have a glimpse, kind of chemical things or whatever, feels connected. And then real journey, real thing is this one, practice of meditation to get really confirm, affirm, trust, confidence, and stay in that. Then fruition. Fruition is more like a universal, in a sense, universal love, a sense of impersonal love for everything, everybody, every being. That's like a natural flow of, I like this geyser of innate love outflowing to the world. That means engaging with the suffering of the world. So this is the value, right? Value of Mahamudra, or task, you can say, of Mahamudra. If we don't have that part, that the conduct part, what's the point, so to speak? So this is the Mahamudra tradition, but then ultimately have to offer with the view tool of meditation and conduct, engagement to the world.
And who it is that awakens in a deep sleep state to recognize the Rigpa. And I was trying to say, well, I know it's not these memories in this body, it's something larger.
Yeah, that's actually good. That's the first step. If we understand everything, we are already awake. Hold inquiry gently. Then we're gonna go into this journey, real journey, and we investigate. If really there's such a thing called Joe here, or I who even inquire. So if so, then how does it exist? Or how it appears and how it exists are two different things. Then Grand Mahamudra, we're gonna go directly to the direct experience, not the concept or how this tradition viewed it. So we let go of everything that and then see how we experience it.
And I think in Machik's teaching, she says, look inward and there's nothing there. And I glimpsed that, but looking outwards, everything becomes solid again, sort of, that the way of taking that inside out is still, really Yeah.
We're going to go into that. Yeah. Mhm. We're going to look at all these different aspects. There are many things to look at, actually, inquire into. We take it for granted. These are habitual patterns. See, we right now look at the computer screen or looking this, and like completely separate from me, things out there, things solidly exist, or the maybe things are not as bad as, but human beings, we kind of identify who he is or who she is. Mhm. Then we get in trouble, we solidified. And so we're gonna, you can say dismantle the habitual patterns through this Vipassana, for example, investigations. Is that so? We kind of take it for granted. Mm. So look really into that. So for some people, habitual patterns are very strong, the mental afflictions or emotion comes, we completely identify with that. That's me, nothing but me, anger, desire. Or some people are very solidified, defy the external object and then get in trouble. We're gonna look at that.